Mr. President, first of all, I want to thank Senator Murphy for his extraordinary leadership. He and Senator Langford, Senator Sinema coming together, leading an effort that was amazing, intense, hard-fought negotiations on something so very, very important. And they got it done. They got it done. A bipartisan border security bill, the toughest in our generation. And so I want to thank Senator Murphy for that and for his continual advocacy and putting the spotlight on the fact that we can still do this. We have this bill. We have this bill in front of us. And the President of the United States, President Biden's gone to the border to say, pass the bill, the bipartisan bill. You know, Donald Trump's gone to the border to say, yay, more chaos, keep it coming. The truth is, and we hear it all the time, I've heard it my whole time in the Senate, Republicans like to portray themselves as being the party of national security. If you want your family to be safe, you need to vote for Republicans. Well, 22 days ago and counting, we'll see how high this number gets. 22 days ago, they had a chance to boost our national security by voting for the strongest border security bill in our lifetime, and 22 days ago, they killed it. That is a fact. And we all know why. Donald Trump told them to do it. And if Donald Trump tells Republicans to jump, the only question they ask is, how high, sir? Democrats are committed to solving the challenges at the border. There are multiple issues that need to be addressed and that are addressed in this bill. And we know it's critical that we give President Biden the tools he's been asking for ever since he came into office to be able to resolve these issues. Again, that's exactly what this legislation would do. It is bipartisan. It meets all of the tests that people have been asking for months. And if it passed, it would significantly improve our nation's security in a number of important ways. It would reform our broken asylum system so that decisions would be made more quickly on who should be allowed to remain in the country and who should be deported. Those allowed to stay would be provided authorization to work so that they could take care of themselves and their families and fill crucial jobs in our economy while waiting for their cases to be resolved. The legislation would create a new emergency authority that would allow the President of the United States to pause the processing of asylum claims of migrants who arrive between ports of entry when cases rise beyond a certain number. The legislation provides important resources to increase our border security, more border security agents, more equipment that our agents have been asking for over and over again, and that the President has asked for over and over again. This is one of the reasons that the Border Security Union strongly supports this as a major step forward that will make a major difference in solving the problems at the border. And so importantly, this legislation included the Fend Off Fentanyl Act, which would make our communities safer by helping government agencies more effectively disrupt the flow of opioids and penalize traffickers. And by the way, that is the whole country impacted by that. People in Michigan, families in Michigan are impacted by that, not just those at the border. And oftentimes people forget that Michigan is in fact a border state, Mr. President. We are a border state. And this bill would provide up to $75 million in grants that are critically needed for our state and local communities and tribal law enforcement agencies to help secure our northern border. You know, Republicans say they care about our national security, but actions speak otherwise. Growing up, I heard over and over again from my mom, actions speak louder than words. And it's never been more true than on this issue of border security. Democrats stand ready. We have been ready, we are ready, we're ready tomorrow, we're ready next week to pass this critical legislation. Improve our border security, keep our communities safe. 22 days have gone by. 22 days have gone by since the Republicans said no. Let's come together and do the right thing. It's not about just talk, it's about action. The American people deserve action, and we are ready to act. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
I know it's ugly, but it's
Thank
true,
you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Phillips, I'm so sorry you just had to hear that, particularly as you're talking about the 1-year anniversary of what you had to go through. It was shameful, and I'm very, very sorry. No one here should be judging you or any other woman who has to make decisions based on their life and what's happening in their pregnancy. And so thank you so much for being here. This is about the freedom to make decisions, healthcare decisions for women, half the population, freedom to make our own healthcare decisions. In Michigan, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, people across Michigan put this on the ballot for our Michigan Constitution in 2022. Overwhelmingly, Democrats, Republicans, people of all ages voted to put that in Michigan's Constitution, the freedom to make our own reproductive health care decisions, and which is great, except now we hear with a national abortion ban being talked about by our Republican colleagues, and if we have a Republican president, a national abortion ban takes that all away. And we also know that IVF now, which is the choice to have a baby and go through IVF to have a child, that also potentially is being taken away, and probably birth control's next. So this is about basic freedom. And so I just want to start, though, a little differently than I had planned. But Ms. Call, you talked about no woman should feel abortion is their only option. I couldn't agree more. I work on nutrition issues, healthcare issues. I've been at the forefront of all of these issues. I could not agree more. But listening to Mrs. Phillips' story today, do you think she had another option?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator Stabenow. So I am not a medical doctor, but I do know our OBGYN has worked for over 30 years and has delivered over 4,000 babies, and I know he has cared for multiple women who were in a similar situation to Mrs. Phillips. And I know that he worked closely with them and
you wouldn't
counseled
agree.
them.
I'm just in the interest of time. I don't
Yep.
mean to interrupt you, but
Yep.
you're saying her baby was dead,
Right.
but
So-
she had another option.
Well, when her baby is dead, it's no longer an abortion. At that point, it's a DNC, I believe,
So,
medically.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your work, but again, there's a lot of different stories to tell here. Also, I wanted to ask Mrs. Ford, you talked about the safety net. Couldn't agree more on that. Right now, we have a situation where we're working to fully fund WIC for pregnant moms and babies, healthy food, nutrition, and so on. Do you support WIC as a funding WIC?
WIC is an important resource for mothers, especially providing formula to their children.
Yeah, so we shouldn't have waiting lists, which is going to happen if we don't fully fund WIC. It seems to me if there's a 9-month pregnancy, you can't have a waiting list, right? And so, Mrs. Call, I would assume you mentioned WIC as being a support, and that's something that you would support?
Yes.
We also, I've been trying for years, actually Senator Grassley and I for years, to put in place quality standards for labor and delivery under Medicaid. Half our babies are born with Medicaid health care, and Republican colleagues have stopped that here in the Senate for years. We don't have national quality standards. I assume as part of a safety net, Mrs. Ford, you would support having quality standards for labor and delivery?
Yes, across labor and delivery, and especially post-abortive care. Fewer than 20 states actually track post-abortive outcomes, and most abortion clinics actually, women who are experiencing trouble are normally referred to a hospital ER.
Right. Well, I'm talking just healthy babies.
Yes,
not
across
post.
the
That's what
board
we should
for
have
any-
that.
for any.
And colleagues should be working together to do that.
Yes.
Yes, we should also, and I'm assuming, Mrs. Call, you would support having quality standards as
Yes,
well?
I agree.
Okay, which is not happening because of folks here in this body. So, Mrs. Phillips, let me go back to you. Thank you again. How has this horrible experience that you had to go through changed the way you think about your family's future and the kind of world you want your daughter to grow up in?
Thank you for that question, Senator. It has been extremely difficult. As I stated before, this was a planned and wanted pregnancy. We still want to expand our family. That's something we plan to do. But unfortunately, while the ban still sits in Tennessee, we're terrified. It was a very traumatic experience that I had to go through, that my family had to go through. My card here says mom and activist. Since what happened to me happened, I have turned to activism because my daughter is growing up in a state without bodily autonomy. My daughter is growing up in a state that lawmakers are telling her that she doesn't have a choice. It's one thing to put me through it. I'm a 29-year-old woman, but to put a child through something like that is inexcusable. And I would say that I'm hopeful that we can come to an agreement, a nonpartisan agreement, in our state capitol and restore abortion access so I can continue my plans of my future and expanding my family, because that's something I desperately want to do, but I'm terrified to do.
Thank you. American women deserve the freedom to make our own decisions, and Mr. Chairman, this side of the dais trusts women.
Senator Lee. Senator Stabenow.
Yes, thank you, Senator Schumer. Tomorrow, as we know, the President's going to deliver his State of the Union address. And, you know, when we think back 3.5 years, this President inherited a mess. Schools were closed. We were trying to figure out how to keep people safe. Too many deaths, too many people in the hospital because of COVID, small businesses on edge. There was such a crisis in our country. And we saw them lean in specifically, caring about people, putting people first every single day. And so where are we now, 3.5 years later? Under the President's leadership, and I'm so proud we partnered with him, we've created, as Senator Schumer said, nearly 15 million jobs. That's the most of any president in their first term. 15 million jobs. Nearly 272,000 of those in clean energy. I can tell you in Michigan, where we do clean energy manufacturing, you know, we make things and grow things in Michigan. And we are at the heart of what we are seeing in terms of a manufacturing renaissance. And it's really exciting. We've got 46,000 projects across the country rebuilding America around infrastructure. 46,000 new projects. We're rebuilding America, and we're including things like high-speed internet as part of infrastructure. That has never been done before. The truth is, we are rebuilding America, bringing jobs home, and investing in our own people. And that's why wages are up, the stock market is up, the number of new businesses being created is up. And the things that need to be going down are starting to go down. Prescription drugs and the pricing of prescription drugs being at the top of the list. We have heard forever about how somebody needs to take on the drug companies. Well, Joe Biden did. The Democrats in the House and the Senate did, without one Republican joining us in doing that. And as we know, Republicans still are on the side of the wealthy and well-connected. Let me just remind folks that when they did their tax bill, the drug companies got a 40% cut in their taxes. That's what they did. We're giving people a cut in their insulin costs, in their cancer drugs, in the medicines that they need to stay alive and thrive. So the bottom line is, Democrats are putting people first, and as the President will talk about tomorrow night, we're just getting started.
Indiana.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the following senators be permitted to speak prior to the scheduled vote. Young for up to 5 minutes, Barrasso for up to 7 minutes, Stabenow for up to 5 minutes, and Cardin for up to 3 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, during his State of the Union address last week, President Biden spoke about solving the ongoing humanitarian crisis at our southern border, and he mentioned the name of Laken Riley. Laken Riley, as my colleagues know, lost her life because of that humanitarian crisis. Laken was a 22-year-old college student. She was murdered by an illegal alien last month. The illegal alien had been previously cited for theft and shoplifting, but was released. And those who knew her described Laken as a shining light and kind-hearted. Her calling in life, Mr. President, was to care for others. And she was on her way to answering that calling, studying nursing at Augusta University, when she was murdered. Murdered by a Venezuelan national who crossed our border illegally. Now, to Laken's family and friends, your fellow Americans grieve with you. We're saddened by your loss. We pray, and we hope that in time you will find comfort. We should all find comfort in the example that Laken leaves behind. But let me not be the first to say, let me add my voice to the chorus of voices and emphasizing that words of condolence are not enough. No, far better for us to honor Laken's life by doing everything within our power to ensure that no other family endures this or a similar tragedy. So to President Biden, who said after his speech that he shouldn't have referred to Laken's murder as an illegal, and to any of my colleagues who's offended by the use of that term, let us dispense with misplaced outrage. Let's stop playing political word games. Let's speak as plainly as possible. The man who killed Laken Riley broke the law when he walked across our southern border. He shouldn't have been in our country. He was an illegal immigrant. Had our border not been broken, had our immigration laws not been continually ignored, he wouldn't have been in Georgia. And Laken Riley would still be alive. The man who killed Laken Riley was arrested at El Paso. He was then welcomed into the country with little obligation other than to follow the honor system, to show up for an appointment with the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, which he failed to do so. This is but one ripple in a wave of illegal immigrants drawn towards and allowed into our border by design. In his first 100 days in office, President Biden signed 94 executive orders to dismantle his predecessor's border policies for the simple reason that those policies actually reduced illegal immigration. He ended the Remain in Mexico policy. He scaled back border enforcement. He revived catch and release. He halted deportations. He allowed Title 42 to sunset. He abused our parole system, allowing millions of people into this country without proper vetting. Overwhelming not just our law enforcement in communities along the border, but also cities far from it. Cities in my home state of Indiana. Last December alone, 300,000 people were processed at the southern border, an all-time high. Mr. President, I request 2 more minutes.
Without objection.
And 9 million illegal immigrants, Mr. President, have crossed our border during President Biden's presidency. If only those among us who have spent as much time worrying about securing our southern border as they do about finding inoffensive terms to describe the man who illegally crossed it and then murdered Laken Riley. For over 3 years, I've urged the Biden administration to reverse its border policies. Record levels of illegal crossings are a national security issue. We know that. But they're also a crime and drug use issue in the state of Indiana and across the country, tragically evidenced by Laken Riley's death. The chaos this administration's policies have caused isn't confined to Texas, not confined to Arizona. Every state is a border state. And I appreciate the good faith efforts of some of my colleagues, Senator Lankford most notably, but others to find bipartisan solutions to strengthen our border security. And I remain hopeful that we in Congress can find a path to improving our border security laws and to actually enforcing them. But the occupant of the Oval Office is not powerless to act. At times, President Biden presents himself as a border hawk, waiting on Republicans to give him the tools to end the crisis he created. We should note the president has routinely pushed the constitutional limits of his office in pursuit of political and policy goals, but now he claims when it comes to the border crisis, he's hemmed in from taking action by Congress. Despite the tough talk, we regular Americans would be forgiven for concluding that this administration wants the crisis on our southern border to continue. Prove us wrong, Mr. President. Fixing the border begins with you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, every year on this floor, a senator reads George Washington's farewell address. This year, Senator Cardin, who's retiring from this body, was given the honor of reading the address. It's so that we in the Senate remember the lessons from George Washington. So let's reflect on what's in George Washington's farewell address. And it is this quote: "Foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government." Well, the majority leader of the United States Senate certainly knows that, because 4 years ago, he quoted these very same words. Yet he ignored them totally today in this body when it comes to our ally, Israel. Hours ago, the senior senator from New York crossed the line by calling for a new government in Israel. Let's be clear. Israel is a democracy. It makes its own choice about who they want to lead them. Doesn't need to have a senator from New York's interference. The senator also made the outrageous statement that the Prime Minister of Israel, in the words of the senator from New York, is a, quote, obstacle to peace. This is exactly backwards. It is the terrorists, the rapists, the murderers of Hamas who are the obstacles to peace. Let us be clear, demonizing our friends is not going to protect them from the brutality of Hamas. It only works to alienate our allies. It puts our common goals of peace further out of reach. Israel deserves an ally that the people of Israel can trust, most especially when they are battling terrorism. Senators on both sides of the aisle in this body have affirmed that Israel has every right to defend itself. We must also respect Israel's right as a democracy to choose its own destiny. Mr. President, now on a separate matter, I come to the floor to speak about President Biden's State of the Union speech. Speech is likely a preview of his 2024 acceptance speech at the Democrat convention this summer in Chicago. From start to finish, it was the angriest, most partisan, most divisive, and most vindictive State of the Union that I can recall. President Biden used his most important speech in 50 years to launch a direct attack on half of America. Shouted, lied about them, belittled their concerns, and if people had the gall to disagree with him, he screamed that they were the enemies of democracy. President Biden said all of this to hide his disastrous record of failures. 3 years ago, President Biden said, "Without unity," he said, "there is only bitterness and fury." Last Thursday night, what we saw from President Biden was bitterness and fury. To me, this was an insult to every American. The President showed no respect for the American people, for our institutions, or for the truth. Instead, we heard an hour of dismissals, denials, distortions, and deceptive spin. President Biden is only himself to blame. It is his disastrous policies that cause us to be in the mess that we find ourselves. President Biden said, quote, "The state of our union is strong and getting stronger." Well, that may be his opinion, but it's not what the American people believe. Prices are up 18% today compared to the day that he took office. President Biden said he needs new laws to secure the border. That's not true either. President Biden has the power to secure the border, and he knows it. He simply lacks the backbone. During his first 100 days, the president took 94 executive actions that threw our border wide open. Stopped building the wall, turned detain and deport into catch and release, and more than 9 million illegal immigrants have poured across our southern border since Joe Biden became president. Now, that includes hundreds of terrorist suspects, thousands of hardened criminals. This is dangerous for our country, Mr. President, yet Joe Biden can't say that. Since his speech last Thursday, he has spent more time groveling for using the term illegal immigrant than apologizing for not knowing the name of Laken Riley. People all across the country remember her as the 24-year-old nursing student who was murdered by an illegal immigrant. President Biden also claimed our global alliances are stronger than they ever were. That's not true. Since Joe Biden became president, America has lost its standing in the world. Our allies don't trust us. Our enemies don't fear us. By every metric, we are worse off today than we were the day Joe Biden took office. 7 in 10 Americans say that our nation is heading in the wrong direction. No amount of scolding or lecturing by the president is going to change that. No amount of yelling will cover up President Biden's endless failures to lower prices. Yelling by President Biden is not going to restore confidence in the American dream, which his own inflation eroded. Angry blame shifting by President Biden is not going to stop the flood or reverse the flood of the 9 million illegal immigrants and illegal border crossings. Nor will it protect innocent Americans from the illegal immigrant crime. Families in my home state in Wyoming and all across America are fed up with the Biden blame game. Americans are not imagining that their grocery bills are higher than they ever were before. The bills actually are higher. Americans aren't imagining that the border is more dangerous than ever before. It is more dangerous. And watching President Biden's speech, clear to the people all across Wyoming and to like-minded Americans that the president doesn't listen. Fortunately, Senate Republicans are listening. You heard it last week from the junior senator from Alabama. Her response was remarkably positive. Unlike President Biden, she offered a bright vision for the future of our nation. The senator said, "Together we can reawaken the historic spirit of our great nation," and she is right. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I just want to say for the record, it's been 36 days since Republican colleagues voted down the strongest border security bill in decades. So that's a reality. But what I wanted to speak about was the president's budget. When he was growing up, President Biden's dad used to say this: "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value." Well, President Biden's budget just came out, and I'll tell you what he values. President Biden values investing in the middle class so that families are able to work hard and get ahead and build a better life for their children. He values ensuring that teachers and firefighters aren't paying more taxes than billionaires. And he values Social Security and Medicare, programs that have lifted up millions of older Americans out of poverty. A whole generation, a great American success story. Meanwhile, we have the Republican nominee, the former president, in a CNBC interview vowing to cut Medicare and Social Security. Show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. The Biden budget invests in growing our middle class, continuing the policies that have made our economy the strongest in the world. Since President Biden and Vice President Harris took office, the economy has added about 15 million new jobs, the most ever in the first term of a president. The unemployment rate has stayed below 4% for 2 years in a row. We haven't seen that in more than 50 years. Wages are up, the stock market is up, new small businesses are up. Meanwhile, the Republican agenda slashes investments in our families while cutting taxes for the wealthy. Republicans like to talk about cutting the deficit. Meanwhile, President Biden is doing it. His budget would reduce the deficit by $3 trillion by making the wealthy pay their fair share and cracking down on tax cheats. The Biden budget lowers costs for families in a number of ways. It invests in affordable child care so that working families aren't scrambling to find quality care at a price they can afford. It increases affordable housing and helps American families buy their first home and achieve their dream. Meanwhile, it makes higher education more affordable and cuts the burden of student debt. And it continues to lower prescription drug costs, helping people afford the medications they need. And best of all, it restores the expanded child tax credit, which was enacted as part of the American Rescue Plan. The expanded child tax credit helped cut child poverty in half in 2021. And President Biden's budget brings it back, giving families some breathing room. We also know that families are concerned about our national security. The Biden budget invests in a secure border through technology that detects fentanyl, more border patrol officers, more immigration judges, more asylum officers, so the decisions can be made quickly on who should be allowed to remain in the country. And finally, the Biden budget protects and strengthens Social Security and Medicare. These aren't just government programs. They're a promise that after a lifetime of hard work, you're going to be able to retire in dignity. Meanwhile, Republicans continue through their presidential nominee to focus on cutting programs that break that promise.
Order, please. Please take your conversations off the floor.
Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value, Mr. President. A thriving middle class, safe communities, security for our seniors, and ensuring that the wealthy pay their fair share. That's what the president values. We've come a long way. It's time to build on the progress. Thank you. I yield the floor.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accord.
Well, first, thank you to Senator Schumer, Senator Murray, all the appropriators and the staffs who've been working literally 24/7 to be able to get this done. The American people sent us to Washington to govern, and that's what this is about. And Democrats are always willing to work with Republicans to be able to get things done for people, to be able to do the right things for people. The important work of funding the priorities of the American people is what's in this omnibus that we have been pushing so hard to get done. These bipartisan appropriations, as have been said, make significant investments in people's quality of life, in our national defense, in supporting our service members, ensuring that we can compete with communist China, and they invest in health care, including mental health. I like to say health care above the neck, as well as health care below the neck, and other critical services as well. We must pass these bills quickly to avoid an unnecessary and harmful shutdown. These investments also reflect the continuation of a promise Democrats made to the American people when the Affordable Care Act was passed 14 years ago. Since that time, 46 million Americans now have affordable health care. 46 million people. 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions are protected because of the work that we did as Democrats. And 40 states plus DC have expanded Medicaid for low-income families, for the birth of babies. About half the babies in this country are born under Medicaid health care. So it's critical. And now Democrats continue to lead on health care through lowering prescription drug costs, comprehensive funding in mental health care. We're going to see more and more of this coming out, community care. That's very exciting to me, and a commitment to protect Medicare and Medicaid. Meanwhile, Republicans continue to want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I feel like it's Groundhog Day every time I hear Donald Trump talking about this. They want to eliminate protections for 100 million Americans that have pre-existing conditions, and they're ready to cut Medicare and Social Security. The American people deserve better than that kind of a health care agenda, and that's why we continue to put Americans first.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. The American people sent us to Washington to govern, and that's exactly what Democrats have been doing and continue to do. We're rebuilding America. We're bringing jobs home. That's what essentially Senator Schumer is talking about. Jobs that were overseas coming home. And we're taking on big corporate interests to lower costs. We're growing the middle class and focusing on lowering costs. And we took on one of the biggest areas of cost for Americans that have been talked about for years, and that's Big Pharma. We took on Big Pharma, and we won. Now seniors don't pay more than $35 a month for insulin, and that's a big deal for people. Shingles and pneumonia and other vaccines are free, and drug companies can no longer rip off seniors by raising their prices faster than the rate of inflation. If you're getting a cancer treatment in a doctor's office or a hospital, this makes a huge difference. Lower prices are being negotiated for 10 drugs that treat conditions including blood clots and heart failure and cancer and arthritis. And in 2024, right now, the out-of-pocket cost totally for seniors is $3,200, not $10,000, not $14,000, not $20,000 or more that many people pay. $3,200, and next year it permanently goes to $2,000 a year, which is a very big deal. And that's going to save nearly 19 million Americans an average of $400 every year. But Big Pharma continues to fight every single one of these things, and they've gone to court, in fact. They've gone to court against the Biden administration to stop negotiation. And the Republicans are right there with them. So we're going to continue to stand up to the drug companies to reduce prescription drug costs. But our work is in total contrast to the House Republican budget that was just released, that where they announced all of the things I just said would be repealed. All of them. Costs would go back up. They wouldn't repeal the 40% tax cut that they gave in 2017 to the drug companies. Oh, no. But every single thing to lower costs would be repealed. They proposed significant cuts to Medicare and to health care through the Affordable Care Act. And, like we heard from Donald Trump yesterday, Republicans will do nothing to give women access to the reproductive health care that we need. In fact, today, 1 out of 3 women now live in a state with extreme abortion bans. 1 out of 3 American women. And Donald Trump said he was proudly the person for being responsible for ending Roe v. Wade and causing all of this chaos. So while they rip away health care for Americans, we trust women to make our own health care decisions, and we're going to continue to take on Big Pharma, and other corporate interests that are ripping people off so we can lower their costs. Thank you. All of us want to get all of this done that Leader Schumer talked about. We know this needs to be done on a bipartisan basis, and that's what we do. We know that that's how we govern, is when you work across the aisle to be able to get things done. I do want to take a step back for just a moment, though, and look at President Biden's first 2 years with the Democratic Senate and House, who were committed to getting things done every day for the American people. We were and are committed to growing the middle class of this country, to taking on corporate interests, to be able to reduce costs. All of that is still, of course, a focus for us. But the challenge has been, since Republicans took the majority in the House, we've seen chaos every single day, MAGA Republicans don't believe in governing, in solving problems for the people of our country. They believe in power at all costs. But having said that, I want to thank the Republican leaders that are working with us to avoid a government shutdown and pass the critical security supplemental. It is absolutely critical that we come together to address the serious problems at the border. We support that. We want to get that done. It's critical that we stand with democracies of the world and show leadership at this time of overwhelming humanitarian need. And it's critical that Congress do its basic job, just the basic job of funding our military and federal services that impact the quality of life of every American. So as usual, we are committed to working across the aisle to get all of these things done and move our country forward.
Thank you, Senator Stabenow. Senator Murphy. Senator Stabenow.
Well, good afternoon. You know, over and over again, we stand at the podium and talk about being laser focused on growing the middle class as Democrats and bringing down costs. That's what we have been doing. That's what we are doing. We're seeing results of that for people, more to be done. But that's where we're focused, growing the middle class and bringing down costs. And there is no question about it that when you look at the top of the list of what we've been able to get done in this area, it's around prescription drugs. It was no easy task. Everybody's talked about bringing down prescription drug costs and negotiating Medicare for years and years and years. We took on Big Pharma and we won. And not one Republican in the House or the Senate joined us. Not one. When they were in charge, what did they do for pharma? 40% tax cut. When we're in charge, it's about lowering the cost for people. And when you look at it now and you talk to people, every crowd I go to, I ask people to raise their hand. Do you know someone, or have you had your insulin cap $35 a month? People raise their hand. We now have 3 out of 4 asthma inhalers that are being capped at $35 a month. Shingles and pneumonia and other vaccines are free for seniors. This year, a senior's out-of-pocket drug cost for the whole year is capped at $3,500. I met a woman the other day who's already met the cap and will not have to put more dollars out of pocket. And next year, that cap goes to $2,000 and will continue there. And we know that lowering prices involves negotiating, and Medicare is negotiating the top 10 most commonly used drugs right now, which is going to make a huge difference for people because we, as we know, have been paying the highest prices in the world. And that, under President Biden and Democrats' leadership, is changing. We're cracking down on costs in so many ways, and I want to mention just for a moment rural America, where we have been focused on high-speed internet, which is so critical for our rural hospitals and schools and families and farmers and small businesses, focusing on supporting family farms and good-paying jobs. And today I'm very proud to be announcing with our Democratic colleagues on the committee, with the full support of Senator Schumer and our whole caucus, the Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act, which is going to lower costs for farmers and for families. We are laser focused on keeping farmers farming, keeping families fed, and keeping rural communities strong. And that's what this does. And even though we are starting with a bill that is put forward by Democrats, we are reaching out, I am reaching out to our Republican leaders on the other side to say this is the moment to complete the negotiations, because farmers and families need the certainty of a 5-year farm bill. And just to make it clear we're serious about something that can pass, we have over 100 bipartisan bills in our farm bill, over 100 bipartisan bills. Because whether it's lowering the cost of prescription drugs, if lowering the cost of food for your family, household bills, or high-speed internet, we are working every day for people, whether you live in a big city or a small town.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Thanks, Chuck.
Mr. President.
The senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, I announced the Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act, put together by distinguished colleagues on the Agriculture Committee, including the presiding officer. And we thank you so much for all of your leadership on so many provisions here that both affect Georgia and our entire country. So thank you for that. This is a serious bill that reflects bipartisan priorities to keep farmers farming, to keep families fed, and to keep rural communities strong. I hope those are values and priorities that we all share together. The foundation of every successful farm bill is built on a broad bipartisan coalition. That's how we get it done. Mr. President, as you know, we get it done because we bring everybody together. We don't put forward things that lose votes. We put forward things that gain votes so that we can do what we did in the last 5-year farm bill, 2018, where we had 87 members of the United States Senate come together, which was extraordinary at that time, because we built the coalition. We respected each other, and we did not look for policies that would divide. So it's important that farmers and ranchers, rural communities, foresters, nutrition and hunger advocates, conservationists, bioenergy advocates, local governments, and climate advocates come together. That's a broad coalition, and so many more, I could list on and on, that come together to be able to address a 5-year bill that addresses rural America, our economy, feeding Americans, being there when they need some help, protecting our land and water and air resources that are so important, and investing in a rural quality of life, like where I grew up in northern Michigan in Clare. The Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act is a bill that holds the coalition together. Now, it is a bill that I put together with my Democratic colleagues on the committee, but it includes 100, actually over 100, bipartisan bills. Over 100 bipartisan bills introduced this Congress through the hard work of Republicans and Democrats on the committee, as well as off the committee, and the input of a broad Farm Bill coalition. I would hope at this point I would be in a situation where we would be bringing forward a bipartisan bill, but we are not there yet. But it's my responsibility as the leader of the committee to put forward, I believe, is the vision and the policies that can get us there. And that's what this is talking about. There are many things in here. I will not go through all of them, Mr. President. There are too many. But I will say this. We are strengthening the important farm safety net by making meaningful investments that focus our tax dollars, our American resources, on American farmers with dirt under their fingernails, not billionaire Wall Street or foreign investors, who, by the way, we ban from receiving commodity payments in this bill. This bill makes support for beginning farmers a priority. We need more people that want to go into farming, either starting from scratch or going home to the family farm. We need them. We need the people being willing to do the critical work, and they need to be a priority, and they are a priority in this Farm Bill. Our bill will provide farmers and ranchers with more choices that provide timely and flexible assistance that meets their needs. Lower cost crop insurance, a more effective commodity title, more opportunities for affordable credit to operate the farm as input costs go up. And the list goes on and on. We importantly permanently authorize the Agriculture Disaster Assistance Program, which unfortunately is having to be used more and more and more. And I want that to be clear, that that's a permanent part of agriculture policy. And this bill makes it a priority to help our farmers and ranchers address the emerging risks that we know they all face. We also ensure that farmers are planting to meet market demand, not to receive a government payment. We made major reforms in the 2014 bill to emphasize that, and then again in 2018, and it's important to keep it going. Farming has always been one of the riskiest ways to make a living. I've said it's the riskiest business around. Nobody else has to monitor the weather all day and night to figure out what's going on as to whether or not their business is going to be okay. And the climate crisis is making it even tougher. Think about the Michigan cherry farmer who loses an entire crop due to an early warming and then a cold snap, and this has happened in Michigan. Or the wheat farmer whose hard work is leveled when a violent summer storm pummels their fields with hail. Conservation programs are a vital part of our risk management for farmers today. I'm proud that they are voluntary, that they are popular, that they are used, that farmers think they make a difference, and it's important that we continue to invest and protect those dollars. This bill builds on our historic investment in those popular voluntary conservation programs by making the title, the conservation title, a permanent investment, a permanent part of the Farm Bill, permanent authorization, and we invest to make sure we are confronting the climate crisis today and in the future by taking the dollars that we have allocated for climate-smart agriculture, putting it into the Farm Bill, and supporting these important voluntary climate-smart efforts. This will put resources into farmers' pockets to continue the practices they are already doing and that they want to do more of on the farm and the ranches around the country. And while the Farm Bill is the backbone of the farm safety net, it's also the backbone of the family safety net through our nutrition title. And I want to thank our subcommittee chair, who's presiding now, who chairs our subcommittee on nutrition, for your leadership. Thank you very much. The Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act reflects our shared belief, Republicans and Democrats, that no American parent should have to worry about whether or not they will be able to feed their children. No American seniors should have to choose between buying food and paying for their medications. No American service member should experience hunger while serving their country. This bill will help millions of hardworking Americans make ends meet in a time when they really need it, a time of crisis, by continuing the 5-year update to the SNAP Thrifty Food Plan, included in the bipartisan 2018 Farm Bill, to ensure that SNAP reflects the realities of how Americans buy food and prepare food. It improves security measures and cracks down on bad actors to strengthen the integrity of nutrition assistance. The bill invests in SNAP employment and training to help people improve their job skills and excludes subsidized income earned through employment and training from counting as income for SNAP, so that people will participate in these services and they can finish their training. In rural development, this is such an important part of the Farm Bill. This is about jobs. It's about quality of life. We have such an exciting bioeconomy today. In the Farm Bill a number of years ago, I put in a whole program called Make It Here, Grow It Here, where we focused on biomanufacturing as well as our biofuels and what we can do to add opportunities for farmers and income and jobs. And we build on that in this bill, whether it's biofuels, sustainable aviation fuel, biomanufacturing, lifting up bio-preferred labels so people know and can feel confident in looking for those labels, American labels. We lift this up. We also strengthen our efforts with farmers and ranchers on clean energy, both clean energy efforts to lower costs for citizens in rural America, to bring down their utility costs, but also to help our farmers through the Rural Energy Assistance Program, which we strengthen. And for the first time, we put not just authorizations, but actually mandatory Farm Bill resources, money into the rural development title to lift up really important quality of life issues that determine whether or not people can actually stay and live in rural communities. For instance, childcare, access to mental health and addiction treatment facilities, rural housing, which is such a challenge. So many things we need to be doing to create opportunities. Now, I'm proud that we have already made rural communities a priority through high-speed internet in rural communities and what we did in the infrastructure bill. And we also have made wastewater treatment and other infrastructure issues in rural communities a part of what we have done in other areas. But we need to do more as it relates to the quality of life for families in rural communities. And the Farm Bill puts forward a vision to do that. The Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act is the product of a lot of work, and Senator Bozeman and I, my ranking member, started this process 2 years ago at my alma mater, Michigan State University, with our first field hearing to hear from all those impacted. And we have both, as well as other colleagues, traveled the country to hear ideas and to hear what is important to do. But we're beyond that now. It's time to get it done. It is time to get it done. Mr. President, I have been around here long enough to have participated in 6 farm bills. It's the 3rd one I've had the honor to lead. I know what it takes. I'm so honored and proud to have, I may be biased, but I believe I have the smartest Farm Bill team there is, talented people who have put this together, but we know how to do it. We know how to do it. And I know that the only path forward is to hold together a broad, bipartisan Farm Bill coalition. When you break the coalition up, it never works. It never works. It fails time after time. In some ways, the discussion and the attacks right now on nutrition make me feel like it's Groundhog Day. We saw this in 2012 when the House could not pass a bill because of the fights on nutrition. We saw couldn't pass a bill. Voted down again because of a fight on nutrition. Breaking up the coalition, pitting the farmer safety net against the family safety net will not get us a farm bill. It just won't. I'm so grateful that in doing our past farm bills, we've been able to come together and understand it's about recognizing broadly the needs of farmers and food and jobs and all the other issues that are so important to our rural communities and, frankly, urban communities as well. And that's what I'm committed to do now, because that's the way we get a bill. Our farmers, our families, our rural communities deserve the certainty of a 5-year farm bill. There's no reason we can't do this. There's no reason that we can't do this. If we take the lessons of the past, if we creatively work together to meet the needs that we know need to be addressed as more and more volatility affects our farmers and ranchers across the country. We can do that. We can do that. And I'm committed to doing everything in my power, Mr. President, as chair of the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, to make that happen. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Well, thank you, Senator Schumer. It's great to be here with you and Senator Murphy. On April 2nd of this year, Donald Trump came to Grand Rapids, Michigan, lamenting what was happening at the border, and he used the tragic death of a young woman in a domestic violence case to politicize what's happening at the border. While he lied and said he had met with the woman's family, and he had not, he was more than willing to exploit her death for his own politics, instead of supporting the strongest bipartisan border bill in decades. 98 days ago, Republicans had the chance to put action behind their words, protect our national security, and effectively address the problems at the border. 98 days ago, they killed the bill. We all know why. Donald Trump told them to. Democrats want to solve the challenges at the border and give the Biden administration additional tools to solve them, and that's exactly what this strong bipartisan legislation would do. It would fix our broken asylum system. It would give the president the emergency powers to manage the border. It would boost funding for our border agents and officers so they have the tools they need, both at the southern and northern border. And it would make our communities safer by stopping the flow of deadly fentanyl into our country. Our Republican colleagues said they wanted to come together to get a strong border bill. That's exactly what was done That is exactly what was proposed and put on the floor. They say they want to solve the problems at the border. Their actions say otherwise. It is past time for them to join us and get this done. We're so glad that you're all with us. This is such an important discussion to have, and we know that we're going to have in front of us the toughest border security bill in decades tomorrow, negotiated on a bipartisan basis, and there's really important provisions in there that relate to fentanyl that all of us are affected by and the people we represent. And I'm so glad my colleagues are here. On April 2nd, the Justice Department announced the largest law enforcement seizure of fentanyl in the history of Michigan. April 2nd. 40 kilos of fentanyl were found, enough to kill every Michigan resident. Pretty serious stuff. On April 21, a Michigan medical examiner raised the alarm on a really bad patch of fentanyl, as he called it, and warned the public that there had been 6 overdoses in 11 days. These are 2 headlines from last month, and it does not come close to encapsulate the pain and tragedy of Michigan families who faced this issue of drug overdoses over the years. So we know we're here because we want to combat the fentanyl crisis and give U.S. Customs and Border Protection the tools they need to stop the drug from coming across the border. And in this bill to combat the fentanyl crisis, it would invest in 2,400 more Customs and Border Protection officers, new and innovative equipment to increase detection, Drug Enforcement Agency efforts to disrupt drug trafficking networks in Mexico, and enhanced lab analysis of fentanyl samples. So it has been 105 days. 105 days since a strong, not only bipartisan, you could say tripartisan bill was brought to the floor of the United States Senate that would make a real difference in what we are talking about today. And it's time for our Republican colleagues who keep going to the floor and saying, somebody should do something about the border. Somebody should do something about the border. Well, 105 days ago, they had a chance to do something. Tomorrow, they're going to have another chance, and we hope that they will join us in voting yes. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Senator Stabenow.
I know you have to preside, so we appreciate the fact that you are here. And let me just one more time, if it doesn't matter which border you're at or if you're in the interior of the country, this issue on deadly fentanyl affects all of us. That's why we are here, all of us. That's why we are here. And tomorrow it's very simple, very simple. Stop the speeches on the floor. Republican colleagues have a chance to do yes or no. Very simple. You want to stop the flow of fentanyl? Yes or no? Do you want to strengthen our border security in our country? Yes or no? And we hope that they're going to join us and vote yes. Happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Senator Stabenow, so Senator James Langford said he hasn't heard from any of his Democratic colleagues to renegotiate. Obviously, he led those efforts in February before they failed. Do you all plan to reach out to him ahead of the vote tomorrow, or when it does likely fail, do you plan on just reaching out to him to start this negotiation?
Well, I think, first of all, I have talked personally to Senator Langford about this legislation and encourage him, as well as all of our colleagues, to do what they did, which was very tough negotiations, and just recently talked with him. And he didn't talk about renegotiating the bill, but I can't imagine at this point, after we have done all of this, I think the first question is, what's Donald Trump going to say? Is Donald Trump going to, does he want to renegotiate this? No, he wants chaos at the border. And so, to me, we have the bill that was negotiated. Very tough negotiation, and I so appreciate and respect Senator Langford, but we have that bill. And so I think the next question would be, what is their leader, Donald Trump, going to say about whether or not he would allow them to vote on something new?
Hi, Senator. Some of your Democratic colleagues have come out against this legislation now that it's no longer attached to a supplemental, as they say it doesn't do enough to protect dreamers and whatnot. What's your response to them?
Well, from my perspective, and welcome my colleagues, we certainly do need to do more. I mean, dreamers have waited way too long, and their families have waited way too long. And if this was something that we could do, as Democrats on the floor of the Senate and get the 60 votes necessary, we want to do that. We absolutely want to do that. There's other areas that, of course, we want to do. We want comprehensive immigration reform. I was here in 2013 when we passed this huge bill that moved forward on all aspects of immigration reform on a bipartisan basis. And it's one of the tragedies, I think, that this never became law. So we certainly know, I respect and understand colleagues. I know that President Biden wants to do whatever he can administratively to be able to address these issues as well, because this is only one aspect. Stop the fentanyl, deal with the border security issue, but we certainly have issues with dreamers and families and people who have come here legally or have come here, want to be here legally, and want to have the opportunity to be a part of America. So, yes.
Senator Stabenow said it well. We need comprehensive immigration reform, but that's not what this bill is. This bill is about border security. We need border security as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
See, there are a couple of appropriators up here. Republicans have been very clear they're going to block this bill tomorrow. You talk about the funding for Border Patrol agents, fentanyl detectors, other things like that. Could you put some of those things into a domestic supplemental or perhaps the year-end spending package if and when this fails tomorrow? To what extent can these things be addressed or these priorities be funded through the appropriations process, supplemental appropriations process?
I'll just give you two thoughts. First of all, I'm sorry, you're a senior appropriator here. But two thoughts. First, I am not stipulating to how the vote is coming out tomorrow. I understand that that's how pundits feel. But I don't think we should move on from the fact that these guys demanded this specific thing and then changed their mind because Donald Trump wanted to kill it. I don't think that we should move on from the fact that we had a bill where the whip count was over 70. And then it collapsed because Donald Trump said, blame me. And so, no, I'm not going to necessarily entertain subsequent legislative actions, but I will say that the same dynamic will occur in the appropriations context, which is that anything that's actually tough on the border, anything that would actually work to slow or stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States is likely to be killed in the background by Donald Trump, who has made it explicit that he wants things to be as intolerable as possible for political reasons. And I don't think that we should accept that premise as a sort of baseline political weather, and what are we going to do about it? The question is, are there any Republicans who are going to stand up and say, that was then, this is now, this bill was always good, I was planning on voting for it, and now I'm going to take a stand and vote for it and vote my conscience. And so I'm angry because I got texts from my colleagues on the Republican side saying, look, you guys need to get serious about the border. You need to get serious, you need to stretch, you need to empower Chris Murphy and Kyrsten Sinema to really get into a negotiation. And some of the Republicans that I respect the most were really forceful with us. And so we listened. And so we developed a piece of legislation that I don't love, but I know is tough enough to get the job done. And yet they abandoned ship because Donald Trump told them to do so. And so I'm not over that, and they still have a chance to make this right.
Let me just add one other thing. President Biden has asked for additional resources at the border in every budget since he has been president of the United States, and they have not been willing to provide the resources, including the last round. So that is the question, as Senator Schatz said. What are they going to do? Not what are we going to do, not what the president's going to do, but what are they going to do to make good on all the rhetoric about how we have all these problems at the border. What are they going to do? We'll find out one step tomorrow.
Final question.
Leader Schumer announced also today he wanted to move on a contraception bill, making a federal right to that. Is this part of sort of a larger effort to kind of put Republicans on the spot or clarify their positions ahead of 2024, this bill and that bill?
Listen, I'm not going to speak to that here because that's a different issue. We're here to talk about the border security bill. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, there wasn't.
You go.
Okay,
You go.
okay, great. Well, I'm proud to be part of a caucus that actually likes to get things done. And we have shown over and over again that as Democrats, we know you have to work with Republicans. That's how you get things done. And that's how we have seen so many positive things happening for people. So 106 days ago, Republicans had a chance, as our leader has indicated, to actually step up and support something that they helped create, they helped draft, and because of Donald Trump said no. And today, they had a chance to do that again. You know, what's most frustrating to me is that this is not about politics, it's about solving problems that have yet been solved because they are not willing to join us to do that. Fix the broken asylum system, it's still broken because of their vote today. Stop the flow of deadly fentanyl, it's still coming because of their no votes today. Give the president tools to manage the border, still doesn't have everything that is needed because they voted no today. And investing in border agents and officers that are desperately needed, not just at the southern border, but from Michigan, I can tell you, at the northern border, this is an issue for us as well. These problems are real. We know that. The president knows that. That's why we brought the bill up again, to give another chance to actually get this done. You know, it'd be a great drinking game to every time the Republicans went to the floor and said we need to do something about border security to be able to follow that, right? And they'll come back again. I bet when we come back, they'll be back again on the floor saying we need to do something about border security. Well, we do. We do. And we're trying. And they've now voted no twice. And we still have the issues, and we're still going to look for ways to solve the problem because you know what? That's what we do. We step up and offer to work together to solve problems for the American people.
Senator Cortez Masto.
So but I have to say, historic note. Yes.
Slade Gorton.
Yes, yes, and Spencer Abraham. And by the way, historic note, make a note, asterisk in the history books, Maria and I are the first two women in the United States to be incumbent senators. First two. So we have sisterhood here. Let me just say, as a woman in this country, in 2024, sometimes I feel like we're in 1824. I can't believe that all of us are here having a press conference in the United States Senate talking about whether or not we have the right or should have the freedom to be able to determine if we want to use birth control, if we want to use contraceptives, or what kind we would use. I mean, imagine that. It is shocking. But I was shocked also when a 50-year freedom to make our own reproductive choices was taken away by this right-wing MAGA Supreme Court that Donald Trump brags about, that he brags that he did it. And he did do it, along with the support of the Republicans. So this is a moment for all of us who care about freedom in this country to make our own choices, our own healthcare choices, our own choices about who we love, the decisions about who we are. Fundamentally, in this country, we have been based on the idea of freedom. And so here we are in a situation where today Republican colleagues voted against protecting our freedom to make our own decisions about birth control. So we have a message. As Democrats, we're going to stand up stand up for everyone to make their own healthcare decisions, for every woman to make her own reproductive health decisions. And we are not interested in politicians or right-wing judges being in your doctor's office, being in your medicine cabinet, or being in your bedroom. These are personal choices. It's your freedom to make those decisions. And we are standing with the women of this country.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you. Well, thank you for organizing this, and thanks to Senator Markey for your leadership on this.
Back. Monday is the 2-year anniversary of the decision to rip away women's reproductive freedoms in this country through the Dobbs decision made by the Trump Supreme Court. So now, at this moment, my daughter has fewer freedoms than I have had. My 2 little granddaughters have less freedoms in making their own decisions than I had. This is serious. It's not a sideshow. It's not a side issue. It's a fundamental issue. And since the fall of Roe, they've continued their assault, as we've heard, on access to birth control, to IVF, to severe and total restrictions on abortion. In fact, today, 1 out of 3 women of childbearing age live in a state with extreme and dangerous Trump abortion bans. And they want that to be everywhere. That is the goal, whether it's legislatively or by using a 100-year-old law to try to create a way for Trump to do it administratively. In our state of Michigan, 2 years ago, we worked really hard. We put together a ballot initiative, put it on the ballot to protect our reproductive freedoms in Michigan, to make our own decisions, and it passed. Overwhelmingly it passed, including creating not only a re-election of our governor, Democratic governor, but for the first time in 40 years, a Democratic House and Democratic Senate. Why? People wanted to make sure those freedoms were protected, and the state laws were changed, and it became very clear. So people in Michigan think we're okay. But unfortunately, with the national abortion ban or Donald Trump re-elected and doing something administratively, we're not okay. Nobody's okay in this country. Not one state, whether you're in a state that has state laws or a state constitution protecting your freedoms, or whether you're in a state that does not. The reality is that none of that will matter, and every woman in every state is at risk. So this is a all hands on deck moment. My colleagues and I have been working with President Biden and Vice President Harris to protect our reproductive freedoms, and that's why, frankly, we have been holding the votes that Senator Schumer talked about in terms of the right to birth control. Can't believe I'm saying that in 2024, the right to birth control in our country, the right to IVF to start or expand your family. And they have stopped us at every step, and now we're going to see. The next vote will be on protecting the basic reproductive freedoms for women in this country, and we'll see where they stand. For us, we know where we stand. Democrats are working every day to defend our freedom to make decisions about our own health, not a politician, not a judge. The women of this country should have the freedom to make our own decisions about our own health, our lives, and our futures. And we're not going to give up until we have those freedoms fully protected.
For this wonderful hot summer, right? So, and who says climate change isn't real, right? So, it is wonderful to be with all of you. And give it up again for Misha. Wasn't he great? He was absolutely great. And Dr. Sierra Starr and Caitlin, Joshua, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your stories, because they are real stories of real people, real women which is why we're all here. And in a moment, we're going to hear from a real person who I'm so proud of, our second gentleman, Doug Emma. So we're so proud that you are here to join us. And I want to start by saying this. Thank you, first of all, for all the work that we jointly put in 2 years ago to put into the Michigan Constitution the protection of our reproductive freedoms. Thank you for everything you did. Thank you. It wasn't easy, right? It took a lot. We had people standing in line till after midnight. Okay, think of that. And now, think of the fact that we have to do it again. We have to do it again. Because unfortunately, if Donald Trump is elected, if his MAGA Republicans are going into office, they rip all that away. In other words, what he wants to do trumps what we did. So, we have got to be really serious. So that is my first message to all of you. Really, really serious. And I know that's why you're all here. But 2 years ago, Trump proudly overturned Roe v. Wade. He said he was going to do it. And unfortunately, he had the capacity to be able to nominate and confirm new justices, 3 justices, that made sure that that happened. So now today, 1 out of 3 women in our country live in a state with severe abortion restrictions. 1 out of 3 women across our country. Now, we're really proud of the fact that we are not one of those states. And so proud, not only of that effort, but what the governor did in our trifecta in the legislature, by the way, which we have to keep going. We have to keep this going. But we still don't know what the next step is. And over 170,000 women have traveled to other states to be able to save their own lives or to be able to get the care they want, many of them coming to Michigan. And so that's the state of play right now. And here's what we also know. National abortion ban, if they can't get that directly, they're going after medicine, mifepristone. We had a short reprieve with the Supreme Court, but they're coming back, there's no question. Most early abortion care is done with mifepristone, so that's going to go. And then they intend to go after an 1873 law called the Comstock Act, which would allow them to be able to stop medicine and abortion equipment and various things across state lines. Basically, 1873, that they want to resurrect. And if they did that, Trump could do it without Congress even acting. So this is serious when people say, oh, it can't happen, or they can't get all, every branch of government. They're not going to be able to do it. They don't need every branch of government to do this. They need Trump being elected, and then the bonus for them is if they get a Republican House and Republican Senate. So this is very serious stuff. And this week, we're going to see something else, which we anticipate will be a horrible decision by the U.S. Supreme Court related to whether or not an abortion law in Idaho, with its strict provisions that you can only step in the life of the mother, whether that means that when a woman in Idaho goes to the emergency room of the hospital, that she can't be treated if she is seriously ill. Because the law, federal law says if you take Medicare, and every hospital does, you have to treat everyone in the emergency room. But Idaho has said, and lower courts have said, no, you don't. And so what has happened there? Women have been told, go back out to the car and sit in the car, and we'll see how close to death you get. And then maybe you can come back in. That's the United States of America right now. So this is an all-hands-on-deck moment for us. And we are very afraid that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to come down on the side of Idaho this week. Now, I hope not. But I wouldn't bet money on it, that they're not going to do that. So then what is the next thing? Well, birth control. IVF, we've already seen in Alabama through a Supreme Court case, being able to take away the ability to have in vitro fertilization when you want a child. You know, in talking to veterans, one of the most common things that we hear from male veterans, as well as female, is we want access to IVF so we can have children. If we were injured in war, serving our country, we want to be able to have access to IVF to have children. My colleague, Senator Tammy Duckworth, has 2 beautiful little girls after serving in Iraq and being shot down in a helicopter and just about giving everything, including her life, for our country. And she came back, and because of the miracle of IVF, she has 2 beautiful children. So we want to make sure that's protected and birth control is protected. So we thought, well, this is easy. We're going to put in a bill, which we did 2 weeks ago, first of all, that you have the right to birth control, to contraception. We bring it up on the Senate floor. Almost every Republican voted no. So then last week we brought up IVF, the right to IVF. And almost every Republican voted no. So I mention this to say, if people think this is only about abortion, it is not. It is about control over our lives. That's what it's about. So we're not going to let that happen. I mean, that's the bad news. Okay, here's the good news. With President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, that will not happen. None of it will happen. That will not happen. And I have to tell you, I have such confidence in them. You know, 2 years ago, after this decision was made, the Biden-Harris administration went to work on what could they do through rules to protect women. We protect travel across states, to be able to protect access and be able to do all these things that would do everything they could within their power to be able to protect women, which is what they have done. Anyone who wants a baby, a pregnancy, or anyone who needs to make choices about pregnancies, no matter who you are, it's your decision to do that. And our president and vice president understand that to their core and believe in that. And so we've got some work to do. We've got some work to do. This is an all hands on deck moment, right? And we're going to rise to the occasion. We're going to make sure they don't rip away our reproductive freedom. Every person has a right to make their own decisions. That's what this is about. It's the United States of America. It's not 1824, it's 2024. So, we're going to do this together. We are going to do this together. And the person that's going to be right there with us, one of the great team that's going to be right there with us, is our wonderful second gentleman. You know, he's traveled to 40 states speaking out on behalf of all of us. Not only reproductive freedom, but for all the things that we want to make sure that everybody has a fair shot to succeed and work hard in this country and have what they want for themselves and their families, and that Americans are the best that we can be and have every opportunity to do that. He's been out spreading the word about what is at stake if the 34-count convicted felon, Donald Trump, gets elected again. Let me say that again. 34 convicted felon, not to mention he's batshit crazy. But our second gentleman, our vice president, our president and vice president, to their core, get up every day caring about you and me and all of us. Donald Trump gets up every day caring about himself. So we know what needs to be done, and we are going to do it. And we're going to start right now by welcoming our second gentleman, Doug Emmer.
Stabenow's next. We all saw those pictures of Michigan, and I know my colleague is very, very determined to fix these problems, and we appreciate it. Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first, welcome. I know we have survivors of Michigan facilities and Michigan advocates here. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And I just want to thank the staff that put together this report and all the important efforts here. This is really significant, really important investigation, and thank you for bringing this out. And it's true, in 2020, we saw the devastating death of Cornelius Frederick. He was 16 years old, living in a residential facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And after simply tossing sandwich crust at some nearby young people, Cornelius was knocked to the floor and restrained by 7 staff members over the course of 10 minutes. 2 days later, he passed away. This is a horrible tragedy. It's horrible what happened. And I know, based on what the comments here and the reports and so on, that this is not an isolated instance, which is why we're here today. It's wrong and it's indefensible. The stories of harm to children while in care only highlight the need for strengthening investments in community-based models. And I just want to emphasize again, we actually have good news on this front. First, let me go back, though, to say that President John F. Kennedy, the last bill he ever signed before his own death in 1963 was the Community Mental Health Act. It had 2 visions, one to eliminate what were called asylums at the time, and the other was to provide comprehensive community care, which we have not done until this point. And we now have, through a model that 20 states are receiving full funding for now through Medicaid, a healthcare model called Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics. We have services being provided, over 500 clinics across the country, more that needs to be done, and certainly more to be understood, because this is a new model, comprehensive model, based on federally qualified health centers, funding behavioral health care as health care. But this is a really important model for us to be embracing, I believe. CCBHCs provide comprehensive services. They're equipped to care for children and youth with complex behavioral health needs, everything we're talking about today. According to the 2020 Department of Health and Human Services report on the first 8 states being funded for these clinics, about 1/4 of the patients are children and adolescents. And just last week, the National Council for Mental Wellbeing's latest report on the impact of CCBHCs nationwide, and by the way, they've said that one of the most important ways that services have been expanded through these clinics is for young people, services for young people. The same report showed that 82% of the clinics have established teams that are specifically child and youth focused. 82%, which is good news. And 83% of the clinics provide services in 1 or more school settings. So we're talking about clinics that require 24-hour psychiatric crisis services, comprehensive services. Anybody who walks in the door can get care based on a healthcare model. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, we're going to be embracing and looking more at what is actually happening now to meet some of these issues. Obviously, we need inpatient, that's quality care also. But we are, in fact, moving forward on comprehensive behavioral care, and I hope we're going to be embracing this more and more. Ms. Stanford, in your testimony, you emphasize that there's a, quote, pervasive assumption that children's complex behavioral health needs can't be met in community-based settings. And you've talked about that today, which I appreciate very much. Could you talk more about the strategies you would suggest to help counteract that assumption?
I think things like what we're doing here today is getting people to understand what residential treatment is actually providing is the first step. And is something that we've been trying to do for 5 years and thought we'd be further along in by now. But if people think that there's an answer, they're not looking for a solution. So people think that if this is the place where you get that kind of treatment, they're not looking for those community-based treatment options. And a lot more research needs to be done in what could be effective in proving that those models can work so that they can be implemented for children.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Ms. I know I'm out of my time here, but I agree with you. We've got to do more to establish clear pathways for community-based care. You mentioned New Jersey doing good things. I just want to say they are one of the first 8 states to receive full funding for what I just talked about, community behavioral health clinics. And my guess is that is the services and funding that they're receiving in New Jersey to do what they are doing. So I would encourage us to really look more at this opportunity that we fully funded finally through the Safer Communities Act 18 months ago. The funding is there, the model is there, and I hope we're going to move forward and embrace it more specifically. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Stabenow. And for those of you that haven't followed all of this debate, it's very hard to do so. We understand on this committee that there are several pieces to this puzzle. For example, the behavioral health effort that Senator Stabenow has led. Our whole committee on a bipartisan basis worked very hard to get some of those key provisions in other legislation. Chairman Hatch worked with all of us to pass a historic set of reforms called Families First. So what we're talking about today is essentially building on that progress, recognizing that the abuses that we're looking at specifically as it relates to these residential treatment facilities, they're a key part of this puzzle. We're not going to fix this unless we address it. And as we do so, we're going to try to build on matters like Senator Stabenow's legislation and Families First and other measures. Senator Casey has been a great...
Well, thank you so much. And first, of course, everyone will have 5 minutes this morning to ask questions of our witness. First, let me talk further, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned in your testimony that the single most important thing Congress must do amid the increasing popularity of crypto is to pass legislation that establishes federal oversight of non-security tokens. If Congress does not act to fill this regulatory gap, does any federal regulator have the authority to regulate the market for crypto assets like Bitcoin that are not securities?
Senator, thanks for the question. The short answer to the question is no. And I mean, this is really the reason we're here, and the problem is, and as you mentioned in your opening statement, if you measure the Bitcoin economy by market capitalization, upwards of 70 to 80% of the market are non-securities, which means there is no direct federal regulatory oversight. So despite what I think some may believe, this leaves this giant gap, this vacuum, and ultimately customers at risk for loss of money. And I think our enforcement record demonstrates that over the past better part of 10 years. And as you pointed out also in your statement, the problem with our enforcement authority, although powerful, it's reactive. We're never able to be on our front foot in this situation. We're always being responsive to tips, complaints from individuals who typically have been defrauded. Our typical regulatory framework involves registration and compliance with an existing set of rules, which gives the CFTC or any market authority the ability to look through a registered entity, whether it's a broker, an exchange, a custodian, or an individual participant. And those are the types of regulatory tools that enable us to really eliminate, if not reduce significantly, market fraud and manipulation. Anything else, which is the current state of play with crypto, again, is only reactive. So we have a very successful enforcement record, and one that I'm very proud of, and this committee should be too, but ultimately, we're only coming in after the fact, which means money is typically lost, we're not able to get money back to customers, and we're really not having that same deterrent effect that we should have if we had a robust, comprehensive regulatory regime.
Thank you. And could you talk a little bit more about the CFTC's experience protecting retail customers?
Sure. You know, we actually have, despite I think a little bit of a narrative that we don't have much of a retail-oriented market, certainly a huge part of our market is institutional and wholesale, as many of you know, significantly on the agriculture side and the energy side and the large financial institution side for interest rates and credit. But we do have a growing participant pool of retail investors in both futures. Many on this committee are familiar with prediction markets, which is a very retail-oriented market as well. So we do have a pretty robust pool of retail investors, and have so for many years. And I would also mention from an enforcement standpoint, despite some big-ticket enforcement cases against large institutions, which typically involve manipulation of markets or non-compliance, our entire fraud pool of enforcement, or at least a significant portion of it, is very much focused on retail investors. Unfortunately, retail investors fall prey to fraud around metals, gold and silver, which I'm sure many on the committee are familiar with. You see these in commercials or radio advertisements. And also Forex, which is foreign exchange, a very typical area where retail fraud occurs. So if you look at the CFTC's record in enforcement, the fraud is very much focused on retail, and that has enabled us to build a very strong Office of Customer Education and Outreach, and a very comprehensive program to get information to retail investors through the internet, social media, conferences, or other events to make sure they're aware of the risks associated with retail fraud in commodity markets.
Thank you. And finally, if we give the CFTC new authority to oversee the spot digital commodity market, we know that we need to ensure you have adequate funding and the resources to be able to do it, be able to do what we're asking you to do. And that is part of what we are working on. But any fees will not be collected until the agency finalizes its rules and begins registering these platforms. So during the interim, how much do you anticipate would be needed in resources in terms of annual appropriations for you to set up the regulatory regime?
Thanks, Senator. We actually, and you alluded to this, there have been a number of efforts in Congress, both here in the Senate, including this committee, and in the House more recently, to produce bills around legislating authority for the CFTC. And in light of those efforts, over the course of 2 or 3 years, we've actually done a bit of analysis at the agency regarding what we would need. So essentially responding to your question with some assumptions, of course, assumptions based on how many registrants we would have in the broker-dealer space, in the exchange space, in the custodian space. But with those assumptions, which I think is fair and informed based on what we see in the unregulated market, we've largely estimated that we would need somewhere between $50 to $60 million in a first year, and then $30 to $35 million in a second year, with a correlated number of full-time equivalent employees ranging from 100 to 50 to 75 in the first and the second year. We also have estimates for the third year, but we do have a fairly thorough analysis of what we would need in an interim, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years, and we're happy to share that with the committee as it considers legislation.
Thank you so much. Senator Bozeman.
I will now turn to the distinguished senator from Michigan, who I think knows and cares more about the auto industry than pretty much anybody around here.
Well,
Senator
thank
Stabenow.
you so much, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Graham, who I know cares passionately about manufacturing. We share that in common. And I could talk all day. I won't. I know I don't have all day to talk about this. But let me first start by saying that no one is forcing Americans to buy electric vehicles, but I have one. Nobody forced me to get it. My price didn't go up with the tax credits. Unfortunately, the latest round of tax credits is so complicated and limiting that it's certainly not helping as much as it could help. But I will say the biggest issue is charging stations, and I'm about to test that again. I mentioned to the chairman, I haven't driven my car from here to Michigan in about a year, and I'm going to test it again to see how many more charging stations we have to be able to get me back to Michigan in a couple of days. I do want to emphasize, though, and I've said this before, in 1917, when Congress began heavily subsidizing oil production because of fines down in Texas, we didn't have gas stations on every corner either.
And in fact, at the same time, Henry Ford and Thomas Edison were working to develop a battery-operated car, but they had no subsidies. So Congress picked a winner, and they won for over 100 years, and now we're trying to expand this out. And I would say also, Senator Graham, I agree with you. We have a lot of issues. And I guess what I would say is I think we know more of what the answers are. We just need to do it. And then we need to find out where we need to know more about this. But chargers, we know we need more charging stations, electric grid capacity, absolutely. Both of those things are beginning to happen. We're investing in that through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, more usable consumer credit, more American access to rare earth materials. We actually have new mining capacity, lithium capacity being developed in Nevada, which is very exciting because we're way behind. I would also say that our companies are looking at using different kinds of technology that don't take all those rare earth materials. Also recycling, which is becoming a job creator in Michigan for materials. So there's a lot of things that have more battery production, which we know that we need in the United States. And of course, we need to change the Highway Trust Fund, absolutely. But I support American innovation. I will tell you in Michigan right now, we have a stretch of road being built that actually has the charging technology in the road, Mr. Chairman, so that when you drive, you will automatically have your car charged. So I support American innovation. Are we there? No, but we are certainly getting there. And I would also say this, our biggest competitor, there's no question about it, is China. But right now, our companies are competing against a country. That's what's happening. There is not a level playing field. Specifically, China is coming for us. They want to corner the EV market, and their government has heavily subsidized this effort. And they've also been willing to steal our patents, I should tell you, coming from Michigan. So what do? I mean, I believe, have the smartest, most talented auto workers and automakers in the world. We need to do our part to help them create a level playing field. And that's why I'm so glad that we are doing this hearing, because we're talking about more than 10 million good-paying jobs right now. So, Mr. Jenkins, in your testimony, you mentioned the most important thing Congress can do now for the EV sector is to provide policy certainty and continuity. Could you talk a little bit more about that? I know that our private sector, our automakers say, just give me certainty about what's going on.
Thank you, Senator. By that I mean that the tax credits that were implemented in the IRA have just been finalized in terms of their guidance, and many of the programs authorized and funded by the infrastructure law are authorized to spend down through 2026. So these programs are just getting underway, and industry needs to know that they can count on a stable policy environment to make the hundreds of billions of dollars of investments that they've announced across the United States, and to do that with confidence, to drive innovation and to expand our supply chains. And so I think the most important thing that can be done now is to provide that confidence for the industry with bipartisan support for the maintenance of existing policies. Also note that on the consumer side, consumers are just getting familiar with how these tax credits work. January this year, we started to offer at point of sale rebates. That's a new thing for people. So there's a lot for people to get familiar with. We just set the stage. Let's let our American companies and innovators play on that stage and do what they do best.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Switzer, would you just briefly comment on the same issue?
Sure, Senator. Obviously, policy certainty is absolutely essential. I mean, you talked about not just the certainty as it relates to potential tax incentives, but in a competitive environment, we need to look beyond just 5 or 10 years. We need to ensure that policies are in place to ensure that the U.S. is competitive, not just tomorrow, but well beyond that. So that certainty is important. And Senator, as you know, oftentimes, the general public forgets about the long lead times in automobile manufacturing and production. Right. The decisions made today in calendar year 24, model year 25, are effectively locked. Manufacturers are already looking out to model years 28. So policies that change today have a material impact, but they don't fully get realized for years to come. So that's why that policy certainty is so important. We need to ensure incentives are here to build resilient supply chains, to support consumers, as well as to attract the investment and the jobs that we're witnessing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks very much, Chairman Stabenow.
gosh, good evening, Detroit. I am so excited. Aren't you excited? That is a pretty cool plane, I think. That's a great plane. I got to tell you, though, first I got to just say to my good friend Sean Fain, I wish he would just say what he thought. Isn't he great? Everybody in the union who's here, thank you for fighting to make sure we have a middle class in this country. I really am excited, though, to be here, and I know you are too, to welcome back our Vice President, Kamala Harris, to our great state of Michigan. And by the way, this is the 5th visit she's made just this year. It's fantastic. And I'm so excited to welcome back Governor Tim Walz. And I have to tell you, we love any governor from an M state. We'll start there. Not an O state, but an M state. Particularly one who knows where the Great Lakes are and why they are so important to us. You have heard it before, but I am going to say it again. This election, we have two choices, two stark choices, which I know is why you are all here. This is freaking important to all of us and our families. On the one hand, we have our great Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, smart, dedicated public servants who are fighting for an America where all of our rights and freedoms are protected. All of our rights and freedoms are protected. And one where everybody's got a fair shot to make it. That's our America, where everybody's got a fair shot to work hard and to get ahead. On the other hand, there's Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who are running on their dangerous Project 2025 agenda to literally rip away our freedoms. Rip away our freedoms. And they want to give another round of Republican big tax giveaways to their ultra-wealthy buddies and make everybody else pay for it. Let me just say, Kamala Harris is my friend. I can tell you from her time in the Senate, as well as her time as Vice President, I've seen her up close. She is talented. She is hardworking. She is tenacious. And she will be an extraordinary leader for us in Michigan and across the country. Over the past 3.5 years, Vice President Harris has worked tirelessly to move our country forward. Alongside our great President Joe Biden, she has helped bring hundreds of thousands of jobs, including manufacturing jobs, back to Michigan. I'm not exaggerating. Thousands and thousands of jobs that are coming back. Do we have someone needs help? Can we make sure someone's getting? Are they okay? Looks like we need a medic. It is so, you guys have been so wonderful standing here for so long because we love our country. We love Kamala Harris. We love Tim Walz. We're here because we want to move forward. And so I just want to say, I'm proud of bringing jobs home. I'm proud of lowering the cost of prescription drugs, taking on the drug companies to negotiate Medicare and give them the power to get us the best price, not the highest price. And I am so proud that we have in Kamala Harris somebody who fundamentally understands our freedoms as women to, maybe decide our own health care decisions. I'm not interested in Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or Ted Cruz or any of those other politicians being in my exam room or yours. Now, let me just say, you know, and people have been talking tonight, and so I'm not going to go through the litany of all the bad things that Donald Trump did in his first term, or what he wants to do in his second, in his detailed, terrifyingly extreme Project 2025. I just want to say this to Donald Trump. Michigan is not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. We intend to keep going forward with leaders who believe in America, who share our values, and will fight for the things that make a real difference to Michigan and to all of our families. And one more thing, while I have you all here. We're not going back when it comes to our United States Senate seat either. I am so honored to have had the opportunity to suit up every day the last 24 years and go to the United States Senate on your behalf. And while I may be retiring at the end of the year, please know that I'm going to work my heart out, and I hope you will too, to make sure I am passing the torch to our great Democratic candidate, Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. I deeply, deeply love Michigan and care about Michigan, and I know you do too. And I want to pass the torch to someone that loves Michigan as much as I do, and that's Alyssa Slotkin. And I want to make sure we have a President of the United States and a Vice President of the United States who love Michigan as much as we all do, and who will have our backs every single day when they're in the White House. So Michigan, let's do what we know how to do. We know how to win in Michigan. We have been getting people to the polls. We've been winning in Michigan. Let's make sure we do that. So we've got Kamala Harris as our next president, Tim Walz as our next vice president of the United States. Let's go win.
Please welcome United States Representative Alyssa Slotkin.
Michigan, how do you cast your votes?
Good evening from the Great Lakes State. I'm Michigan Democratic Party Chair Lavora Barnes. Michigan has an incredible story. We put the world on wheels and we built the middle class.
And I'm Senator Stabenow. We are getting things done in Michigan in 2022. We flipped our state House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years. We're getting it done in Michigan.
And I'm Governor Gretchen Whitmer. We cut taxes. We protected freedoms. We brought manufacturing home, and we know how to win. This November, we're working together. Michigan cast three president
25 votes for
our next president, Kamala Harris.
And it's so great to be here with all of my labor friends. And, you know, I got to give a shout out to IBEW on their 110 years. They're celebrating 110 years. You're looking pretty good for 110 years. And we want to thank President Brent Booker and all of our friends who are hosting us today. Thank you, Lina, for hosting us today. I know you know this, but there could not be a more consequential election than the one that we are in right now. We've got Vice President Kamala Harris, who's focused on the future, growing the middle class, and Donald Trump, who is many things, but he's obsessed with the past and he's obsessed with himself. Another way to look at it is this race is about the prosecutor and the felon. And the varsity coach versus the JV. I am so confident, because of all of us working together, that we are going to elect President Harris and Vice President Walz. And there is no question that they're going to be laser focused on improving the lives of working men and women and bringing down costs for middle class families. That's what their lives have been about. I also have to say, I'm so excited to support Alyssa Slotkin to be our next United States Senator. Now, my friends, this one's personal to me. This one's personal. I want someone who's going to fight for you every day and loves Michigan as much as I do to be your senator. And that's Alyssa Slotkin. And there's another reason it's personal. When I told Senator Chuck Schumer I was retiring at the end of the year, he said he would kill me if we didn't hold the seat. And unfortunately, I think he meant it. So, hey, you got to have my back on this one, which is easy to do. It has been the honor of my life to suit up every day and fight for you in Washington, D.C. And thank you. It has been an exciting opportunity to be there with President Biden and Vice President Harris when we had Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate. Our priorities were bringing jobs home, rebuilding America, and taking on the billionaires and the big corporations to bring down costs, starting with the drug companies. And every step of the way, every single step of the way, we have made it clear that workers have the right to collectively bargain for good wages and benefits and working conditions, period. We have seen the same thing in Lansing with Governor Whitmer and the Democratic trifecta you helped elect 2 years ago in the House and Senate. And more has gotten done in the last 2 years for working people than we have seen in decades. So that's why we have to make sure we keep the Democratic State House of Representatives. Are we going to do that? We got to do that. How many of you are now working in a good-paying union job? How many folks are working? And you're going to be working for a while. You're going to be working for a while because we're rebuilding Michigan because of the commitment of Democrats in Washington and Lansing, working together to get things done. And Vice President Kamala Harris has been at the head of the line in making that happen with the infrastructure bill after Donald Trump refused to act. Does it make a difference if Democrats are in charge? Yes. Hell yes. Hell yes. How many of you know someone whose pension's been protected because of Democrats. Do you know that Donald Trump would not support that legislation? And Vice President Kamala Harris, she's the one who helped make that happen. Does it make a difference if you elect Democrats? Hell yes. How many of you know a veteran who's gotten VA benefits to cover exposure to Agent Orange or poisons from burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan? Donald Trump, we tried to pass that under his presidency, and Donald Trump actually said our country couldn't afford to do it. Vice President Kamala Harris helped lead the effort to get that done, and over 1 million veterans so far are getting health care. So does it make a difference to elect Democrats? Yes. Hell yes. Do you know someone who has their insulin capped at $35 instead of paying hundreds of dollars a month? Know anybody? You should also know and tell your friends that every single Republican in the U.S. House and U.S. Senate voted with the drug companies and voted no. Every one of them. But here's the good thing. Vice President Kamala Harris cast the deciding vote to make that happen. Vice President Harris cast the deciding vote that has created investments so far in 44 new factories in Michigan, and counting. More is coming. She cast the deciding vote. Not one Republican, not one, supported the Inflation Reduction Act. She's walked the picket line. She's fought for union organizing and led efforts to bring down child care costs for working families. Let's face it, this election should be pretty clear. Vice President Kamala Harris, who stands with working people and supports unions as an essential way to grow the middle class, or a union-busting, self-serving felon named Donald Trump, who talks a good game but doesn't get anything done. We have only 63 days. Whew. 63 days before the November 5th election, and actually voting starts sooner than that. It starts the end of this month. We've got a lot to do to elect our great candidates up and down the ballot and make sure we keep our country moving forward. So just remember this. When you get in your car and you put it in D, it goes forward. If you want to go backward, you put it in R. We are not going back. We are not going back. Not going back. Not going back. That's right. My friends, you know what to do. You've done it before. So let's go win.
Women's health.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, first let me say Republicans and Donald Trump obviously have made this very clear. And we're all today with Senator Schumer, with all of us, going through the areas that they would disinvest for families, take away quality of life, take away services. The backdrop of that is the fact that he's going to do another huge tax cut for billionaires and corporations. $2 trillion before, says he wants to do it again, while we're talking about priorities that American families care about. So let me talk about health care. They want to send the cost of health care and prescription drugs soaring again and rip health care literally away from tens of millions of Americans. Their agenda will increase prescription drug costs because they want to repeal everything we're doing. Not only the $35 cap per month on insulin, but as of the beginning of the year, there's a $2,000 total out-of-pocket cost for, there's a cap for anyone on Medicare, $2,000 a year. So if you've got cancer treatments for $10,000 a month, or you've got a multitude of other medicines, your total out-of-pocket costs will be capped at $2,000 a year. Donald Trump and his supporters want to end that. We also know, and by the way, over 4 million seniors get the $35 insulin cap, and we know that even more will get the total cap. And the administration just rolled out the new negotiated prices for the top 10 drugs under Medicare, cutting by 40% up to 80% the cost, and they want to stop that as well. They will hike healthcare premiums by ending the ACA tax credits. They want to end the requirements that people with pre-existing conditions are covered, which is a majority of people in this country. And they want to stop maternity care coverage as a required benefit, something I fought very hard for and led in the Finance Committee. Maternity care coverage. They want to take away the requirement to cover having babies and women on maternity care. They also want to expand junk plans that cost a lot and don't cover anything. They want to rip the children's health insurance program away from children. So here's the thing. We are working as Democrats with Vice President Harris to build on the progress that we have already made to cut costs and to make sure Americans get the care they need. The contrast could not be clearer on who's on the side of the American people and who is on the side of the wealthy corporations and billionaires of this country. On behalf of people in Michigan, I can tell you, we don't want to go back.
Senator Stabenow on tax policy.
Well, thank you, Senator Schumer. It's great to be here with my colleagues. The fact of the matter is that 2025 is a project that would completely upend the middle class and the quality of life of the majority of Americans. And that's not an exaggeration when you listen to what Senator Schumer was saying. He is going to do what he always wants to do, and Republicans have done, which is big tax cuts for the wealthy, for big corporations, try to stop efforts to make corporations and the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share, and at the same time go after middle class tax cuts and those efforts that lift people up into the middle class. They attack the child tax credit. They attack the earned income tax credit. They attack everything that is supportive of those working hard every day. It may be 2 part-time jobs or 3 part-time jobs, or it may be a low-wage or middle-income job. But those are the folks that need to be lifted up with tax cuts, not Donald Trump's rich billionaire friends. So under Project 2025, a family of 4 making $110,000 a year, family of 4, would be hit with a $3,000 tax increase. But good news for everyone here, if your household makes more than $10 million a year, raise your hand, you will get up to $2.4 million tax cut if you make more than $10 million a year. So it's really clear who Donald Trump cares about. They're going to do everything they can to skyrocket costs for families and small businesses who are trying to keep the lights on and keep the kids fed, and all of the other costs that they have by adding a national sales tax, which is what he intends to do, that will up costs additionally. This is going to cost Americans nearly $4,000 a year. And we already know that millions of Americans continue to struggle with health care, and their project would tax worker benefits, like health care. When you think you've got a great job with health care benefits, now you could be taxed on those benefits. And let me finally just say this as chair of the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. We had all of the agriculture groups in last week talking to us about the needs, prices falling, the need to support agriculture. Let me just make it very clear that Project 2025 guts all of the programs that the farmers have been in talking to us about, eliminates those things that they say are at the top of the list for family farmers, eliminates the key support they need and would receive in the Farm Bill, making it extremely difficult for family farmers to be able to survive. So 2025 is a bad deal, and all it does is show us whose side Donald Trump is on.
Senator Klobuchar on democracy.
Whether you vote for her or not, and I sure hope you will, but even if you don't, she will care about all Americans. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here. Because Kamala Harris needs to be the next president of the United States. And you know what else? I think that she's got a pretty great vice president pick, don't you think, in Tim Walz? You know, we got a governor, we got a lot of governors, but Tim Walz and I talked about the Great Lakes. You know, he's a Great Lakes governor. He knows Michigan. He knows the Great Lakes. And I'm excited, and I have to say that I think the vice presidential race, which is another very weird one, but the vice presidential race I view as the varsity coach against the JV. And one more thing I want to share, because I get so tired of hearing about this as somebody representing you and being so honored for years to suit up every day and go in and fight for you and fight for our jobs and fight for our families. I have to tell you that the economy was not better under Donald Trump. He is actually the only president who left office with fewer jobs, and that was before COVID. This is not about COVID. But he stood in Michigan and said we wouldn't lose one factory, and then we lost 6. And he will say anything or do anything to get people's votes, which, by the way, he says you only need to do one more time, because you don't have to vote more than one more time, because he'll make sure you can't vote again. But the reality is he has no intention on following through. We know his record. And Kamala Harris is going to fight for you every day. She's going to suit up every single day and fight for you. And let me share 2 things that I saw her do that make an impact today for us, among hundreds of things. But she was the deciding vote that has given us Medicare negotiation on prescription drugs, which are bringing prices down. And she will do more. She will do more. There's more to do. She was the deciding vote that put us on the road to a future of a clean energy economy and jobs. One where we are not losing jobs, but we are gaining jobs. And the truth is that because of her leadership, just listen to a couple of numbers. Private companies have announced plans for more than 800 new or expanded clean energy factories in our country, and U.S. employers have added more than 400,000 clean energy jobs already. And you know who's number 1? Michigan. We want to be building those vehicles, those EVs and other vehicles, not China. We want to be doing that. And Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Although I will say this, here's what he knows. The real reason he fights EVs is because the oil companies are panicked that we're going to be able to drive right by the gas station and not have to pay their high prices. That is the real agenda going on. They are the ones behind here, behind the puppet here, and the funding that's going on. And you know what? They set the prices, by the way. Think about Memorial Day. The prices go up. 4th of July, the prices go up, right? Because they set those prices. We don't set those prices. They set them and do price gouging when they want to do that. And the reality is they're giving billions of dollars to Donald Trump to block Michigan's future in clean energy manufacturing. And he's promised them he will do that. billions and billions of dollars. And in fact, all you have to do is follow the money to know what he's all about. All you do is have to follow the money. Because blocking a clean energy future happens because of the oil company money. Repealing efforts for Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices is because of the drug company money. Blocking gun safety laws that would save our children's lives is because of the gun lobby. And don't forget the huge tax cuts that he's promised all of them, all the billionaires that are at the expense of every single person here. That's Donald Trump. That is Donald Trump. Kamala Harris, she cares. And she's working every day to make sure we grow an economy that works for you, to have your back and your family's back. And she's going to take on those special interests even more to lower your costs. So I'm so glad you're here, because Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to turn the page, and move us forward. So let me close by saying we have 18 days. But who's counting? 18 days. And that means, again, we have folks here to sign you up if you're not already signed up. We know that we need to be knocking doors and making calls and talking to our friends and doing everything we can to be able to win this race. We need to have conversations with folks that are a little bit more difficult. We need to listen and then talk to people about what is really happening and really at stake for them and their families. And we don't have to wait till Election Day. Absentee voting, as you know, is underway. And in just a matter of days, polling places in West Michigan will be opening for early voting. So this isn't just about November 5th. This is about now, right now. When you leave here, decide what you are going to do right away. What is it you're going to do today? Right now. And vote right now, absolutely. Start by voting right now, voting right now. You're all the best. It has been my honor to represent you, and I'm excited about this election. We're going to go win. Let's go win.
Oh my gosh, you know, it is so wonderful to see all of you, and I have to tell you, it does my heart good. It's always helpful to have friends, so thank you. All right, it's go time, Detroit. It has been my honor to represent you in the United States Senate. I'm so excited about this election, aren't you? Are you ready to send Alyssa Slotkin to United States Senate? Are you ready to elect Democrats up and down the ballot? And are you ready to elect Vice President Kamala Harris as the next President of the United States? I don't know about you, but Michigan, from my perspective, needs to be the one to send Donald Trump packing for good. It is always great to have President Barack Obama with us in Detroit, isn't it? And medic, I'm sorry, we need a medic. Would somebody raise hands? Could we please get a medic for someone? Thanks, everybody. Do we have someone coming? Over here. It's good. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. You know what? I love being in a crowd that cares about each other, right? I mean, we believe in joy and respect and caring for one another, and they don't believe that on the other side, right? Right. So thank you. Thank you for that. But let me just say, wouldn't it be great if every city in America had the talent and the grit and the amazing comeback story that's been achieved in Detroit? I'm so proud of Detroit. I'm so proud of Detroit. You know, I remember when it started, the T-shirt started with Detroit versus everybody, and you know what? Detroit won. And of course, Donald Trump doesn't have a clue about what he's saying. He is so mentally unstable, I'm not sure he even knew he was in Detroit when he said it. And if he did know, he didn't care. And don't forget, by the way, the comeback story of our auto industry. Donald Trump said, let him go bankrupt. But Democrats doubled down on American manufacturing. And with President Obama's leadership, we moved our country forward. Thank you, President Obama. And now Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are fully prepared and ready to take the next step to lead us forward. I'm so excited about what they're going to do. You know, Donald Trump says we should fear the enemy from within. Not Putin's Russia, not China, not Iran, not North Korea. And he's made it clear that he would activate the military, the American military, to go after people he believes are the enemy from within. And so what does he mean about that? I assume he means anybody that disagrees with him, you and you and you and you and every single one of us who reject Project 2025. But let's be clear. We know who the real enemy from within is, and it's Donald Trump. We know right now, you're here because you know everything's on the line right now. This is a big deal, and we are not going back to the chaos and the corruption of Donald Trump. We aren't going back. We aren't going back. We are not going back. That's right. Vice President Harris and Governor Tim Walz are going to turn the page, thank goodness. And they're going to move us forward joyfully, respecting everyone, protecting our freedoms, creating opportunity for everybody to be able to work hard and get ahead. Kamala and Tim get up every day thinking about us. You know, I will never forget when I first met Kamala as Senator Harris. And we were sitting in a meeting. I'm part of the Senate leadership, and we were talking to new members about what they thought our priorities should be. And Kamala said, I want to focus on the things that keep families up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, whether my kid's going to have food, or I'm going to be able to take them to the doctor, or are we going to have a good job, and are we going to have a safe neighborhood? That's Kamala Harris. She cares about our children, our grandchildren, and the children we don't even know. That's what we care about as Democrats. And Donald Trump gets up every day and only cares about himself. So this is the moment, everybody. This is it. This is the moment. How many people have already voted? All right. How about your mom or your dad or your kids or your neighbor or your friends? We got more work to do, right? And we're going to do it. We're going to do it. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment for all of us. And I just want to say, because we're from the car state, you know, we put America and the world on wheels, and I'm so proud of Michigan. I'm so proud of Michigan for doing that. But here's what we know. When you want to go forward, you put the car in D. And when you want to go backwards, you put it in R. We're not going back.